Hello and welcome everyone to the Tech Sharmit podcast. Today I'm here with another special guest, Art Kagel. Art is one of the most respected expert in the Informix community and he has made a significant contribution to the data management domain. His outstanding contributions have been acknowledged with several awards such as IIUG Directors Award. Not only this, he has been also honored as an IBM champion for more than 14 plus time. So in this episode, we are going to talk about his professional journey. But before we jump into the conversation, I'd like to thank Art for joining us in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Sure. So I've, what can I tell you? Personally, I'm a father, a grandfather, and I've been involved in the Informix tech community for a long time. And I don't know what else to say.
Okay, so let's start with your professional career. So
All
starting
right.
with Fortran in 1970, you have had a very long journey in the tech world. So what initially drew you
Yes.
to the programming and database management?
So I started out with programming in high school. It was one of the courses that was an option in my high school, and I took that and kind of fell in love with it. I did a little more programming in BASIC and COBOL in college, and when I started my professional career, I ended up working for an insurance company, writing FORTRAN subroutines for pension evaluation systems, and took out from there. At some point, I ended up working for a small consulting firm, and that got me interested in consulting, but the journey has been long.
Yes. So was COBOL your first language when you started initially as a student?
No, I mean, Fortran was my first language in high
Okay.
school. Um, and when I was at Polytech, I learned PL1, which is kind of a combination of Fortran and COBOL, syntactically anyway. And then I did a degree at St. John's where I learned BASIC and COBOL. And so it's been a long journey. I learned C along the way. I learned um, many other programming languages. The list is probably 10 or 15 altogether for different projects and different environments, including Informix's 4GL language and the ISQL development environment, and several other fourth generation languages to boot.
Yes, and for sure, like it's a very long journey with these technology. So how do you look at these technology like Fortran or COBOL, and how do you see the future of these technologies nowadays?
I think that COBOL and Fortran still have their place. They're
Yeah.
important. COBOL is still an important business language. The name kind of points that way. Um, you know, um, and Fortran has its place in scientific calculation. The range of numeric data types that are available make calculations easy and allow for a lot of precision. C covers some of that, but I think that that scientific people seem to be more comfortable staying in Fortran, at least among the older crowd.
Okay.
So everything has its place. My dad used to say you have to learn to use the right tool for the job at hand.
Yeah, right. I think this is a straightforward answer that can
Yeah,
clear all those myths which is around these technologies.
sure. Otherwise, you end up with the hammer syndrome. If everything
Yeah.
starts, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. So.
Yes, right. Okay. And during your professional journey, like you discovered Quartz paper on relational
Mhm.
database in 1981. So could you please explain in simple term what is this Quartz paper and how did that discovery influence your career path and approach to the database management?
Sure. So Cod and later date with him, wrote papers on what they considered a new concept in database technology. Um, and that was that data elements don't stand on their own. They're always related to something else. A parent is related to a child is related to a parent. But the technologies at the time, hierarchical database and network database, were very rigid, and changing data forced you to really rewrite your data, and was inefficient. So part of their design and stress for a relational database was those relationships, and that they should be dynamic, and fluid. And the other part was that they wrote a lot about the beginnings of normalization and making sure
Yes.
that data was not redundant, right? If you have the same data element, the same name, for example, in two different places, then when something changes, for example, someone gets married or decides to change their name, then you have to change it in multiple places, or you have
Right.
inconsistencies, right? The whole GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, concept. And those were the main things that attracted me to it, right? At the time, I was building custom databases for projects, and looking at that and going, yeah, this is everything I'm doing is different for a different project, but sounds like a technology that could be used across many different use cases.
Okay. All right. And during the research, I found out that you also invented one algorithm, which is a sort algorithm. So can you share the story behind the sort algorithm that you invented in long back 1985, and what was the problem which you were trying to solve, and what makes your algorithm unique as well as efficient?
Sure. So around that time in 1984, 85, I had done a project for my employer, doing allowing access to reach and frequency data from the advertising industry, from magazines and newspapers and television, on their mainframe system. And they wanted to port it to the then brand new IBM PC-AT,
Okay.
which had major memory limitations, major storage limitations. We didn't have a lot of disk space. We had even less memory space. And part of the requirement was to be able to sort the data based on different criteria. The user could sit there and bring up this entire array, multiple dimensional array of data, and sort it in different directions. But we didn't have the memory on an AT to do a quick sort or anything else.
Mhm.
Plus, the data was fairly sparse. So an array, while it made sense on the mainframe, didn't make sense on the PC anymore. So the data was stored in linked lists. So it's very inefficient to use a shell sort or even a heap sort or a quick sort on a linked list. Works much better on an array. So I needed to develop a new sorting algorithm that could work well with a linked list.
Mhm.
And so what followed was several months sitting with a deck of cards, going, in that data there's a lot of relationships, back to relationships again, and strings or rows of data that's already sorted, right?
Okay.
Like when you shuffle a deck of cards, right? And after that first shuffle, it's not every card is interleaved. And even if they were, each of those halves that were interleaved are still in order, right?
Mhm.
So if we could unshuffle that,
Okay.
and that's where the name of the algorithm came from. I still call it the unshuffle, because what it does is literally looks for order that already exists in the data. Um, and it uses linked lists internally. It uses a DQ, a double-ended linked list, as data structures. And basically, it's a distribution sort. Data is distributed onto those double-ended queues, but you only add to one end or the other, and only if it's larger or smaller than the other end, than the existing end of the queue. If it doesn't
Yes.
fit, then we start another queue. Okay, and then we need to merge those queues together. So
Okay.
at the end of that, I realized at some point that a two-way sort merge, a two-way merge of sorted sinks is not efficient either, right? When you have many queues like that. And so I actually ended up inventing a second algorithm, which I call the ideal merge, which basically uses the fact that each of these queues is already sorted, right? And that we know what's on top of the queue or the bottom of the queue, depending on whether we're sorting, right, ascending or descending. And also the concept and uses binary search to reorder the queues as we remove things from the top and it's no longer sorted, right? The queues would begin in order from the first queue to the last, but as we remove things from the top of the first queue, for example, we hit an element that's no longer less than the next queue, and so we have to actually sort that list of queues. The algorithm is very efficient because it's order kn, where k is a small integer related to the entropy in the data. So if the data is already sorted or sorted but reversed, k equals 1. And it doesn't take a lot more overhead than just checking to see that the data is already sorted. Okay. Right? If you were to read through the data to see if it's sorted, it's about the same runtime as actually sorting it with unshuffle. For the general case, even for random data, it's not significantly slower than a quick sort or a beep sort, because the case is still relatively low. K tends to be around, not much different than a logarithm. So it's not actually log n, but it gets close. And the truth is that in most cases the data is not random. Real world data is not random.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. So I would say like your journey is quite inspiring for those who are preparing for interviews, because there are many students who are preparing for their interviews in order to start their career with IT industry, and they have to deal daily with those questions like how to sort the data, and like they are supposed to write a algorithm for bubble sort, quick sort, and heap sort. So they can learn from your journey, like you actually invented you invented that algorithm to sort the data. So I think this is one of the most useful podcasts for those who are preparing, and they also learning about the sorting, so they can learn from you, like you actually invented the actual sort algorithm. So that this is something really very inspired. Okay. And regarding Informix, like you have been working with Informix since its first SQL release in 1983, I guess. So what initially inspired you, or what initially keeps you motivated, or maybe what initially sparked your interest to work and to start with this technology?
Sure. I was exposed to Informix first. As I said, at some point I was working for a small consulting firm. And we were using a fourth generation language that had its own built-in database for developing applications for clients. And that system was rather buggy. And the vendor who owned it wouldn't own up to the fact that there were bugs. They would say, oh, well, you reported a bug, we'll fix it. Well, just let me know, like, what are the bugs that we know about that there are workarounds for, so we can work around them and we don't have to hit them because we've got work to do. I've got applications to develop.
Right.
And they basically said, yeah, there are no bugs that you don't already know about. It just, yeah, which just couldn't be true. It wasn't. So my boss said, go find us a new development environment. We have to do something, and it's got to have a database so that the clients can develop their own apps and use the same database that we're building them this app for, or whatever app for. And so I had looked at all of the relational databases at the time, which included Oracle and Ingress and Informix and a couple of others, and Progress. And one of the things that struck me at the time was that Oracle had a data. Oh, and the boss, my boss said, and if there are some applications that already exist that we can sell, we can talk to the vendors and resell them. That would be cool too. Well, Oracle had a little book of 20 pages of third-party apps that ran on their database. and
Okay.
Informix had a book that was some 200 and some odd pages. An associate of mine still has a copy of that original catalog. It's interesting. As I said, there are so many apps that we could resell here. And it had its own development environment, similar, which wasn't similar technologically to what we were using already, but the idea that there was a development environment built in that came with the database essentially at the time, that we could use to develop applications, and that was a fourth generation language. It was faster to develop in than C or FORTRAN or whatever. And so we started using that. And I had left that firm and didn't do database work really for a couple of years, and then I was hired along with another consultant by a financial company to recommend the databases and systems that they should move to. They were then on Prime systems with a database system that only ran on Prime, and Prime was about to go belly up.
Yeah.
So they said, come in, look at our stuff, help us decide on an environment. It's hardware, software, languages, databases. And we looked at Sybase at the time, which was the hot thing for the financial industry. We looked at Informix, we looked at Oracle. And they had initially selected Sybase, but it didn't do the job for them. So they ended up using Informix after about 3 months.
Okay.
And I've been using it ever since. I was hired away from them by Bloomberg, and I worked at Bloomberg managing their database systems for 14 and a half years.
Okay.
And then went out on my own doing consulting.
All right. Okay. So as per you, like what do you think, like what is the things that sets Informix apart from other database system, particularly in terms of performance and reliability?
Sure. So one of the things about performance is it's hard to quantify, right? Everybody's system is different. Benchmarks have only a limited, limited usefulness. And at this point, nobody really does benchmarks anymore except Microsoft. And nobody's doing them against them. So there's nobody, it's not even Oracle doesn't do benchmarks anymore. IBM doesn't do benchmarks for either Informix or DB2. But at the last benchmarks back in the mid 90s, Informix was leading every category on performance. And every version of Informix since then has been some 5 to 15% faster than the previous one. So performance is always a thing. It's definitely there. I love the scalability of Informix. I have a client that processes roughly 75% of the unemployment applications in the United States. And when COVID hit, their number of records they were processing went up 5x. Informix just handled it. And we had never designed the system for that kind of volume, but it just scaled up and it handled the work. That's what I love about it. It gets the job done. Also, Informix, in the early 90s, Informix Corp merged with Michael Stonebreaker's Illustra company. And they took the object relational technology from Illustra. Illustra was a great product technologically, but it didn't perform. And they merged that technology into the Informix transaction engine. And after a couple of painful iterations, it was performing as well as their core transaction engine, and is now today the only version of Informix you can get. So it is really an object relational database. It is extendable. It processes extended data types like time series nodes, geospatial data, as well as a dedicated time series or geospatial or nodal database does. In the early 2000s, IBM incorporated JSON and BSON, which is the binary version of JSON that MongoDB uses internally, and the entire MongoDB API, user API. So at this point, Informix is a plug-in replacement for MongoDB and performs at least as well. But you also have that integrated with the relational data that's already in your database. So you actually have a hybrid database. And you can use the Mongo API to access relational data. You can use SQL to access the BSON data. It's that kind of flexibility and extendability. Also, forward and backward compatibility. I have a little utility. I maintain a set of open source utilities for the Informix community.
Okay.
One of them is a little utility that I wrote back in 1992 that takes advantage of an undocumented internal function to get a list of databases running on the server, because at that time there was no other way to get it. That still works on Informix 14. In fact, it still works on 15, on the 15 beta program. It still works against Informix 15.
Okay.
That's a utility that was written for Informix version 4, which is literally 3 technologies ago, not just versions ago. The engine has been rewritten 4 times since then,
Okay.
and it will still work. That's the kind of backward compatibility Informix offers, you know.
Okay. So throughout your journey, like you have not only witnessed the changes for this Informix, but also you have contributed a lot, as you mentioned about your open source project that still, I'm pretty much sure that they are still, they are using those who are working with Informix, they are utilizing those things. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
a, yeah, it's a good thing. Like you have not only witnessed the changes throughout this domain, but you have also changed your approach, and you have provided the projects which you mentioned, the open source project for other community developers as well. So that's really inspiring.
Yeah, and there are several features in Informix that were either inspired by needs that I had and reported back to Informix Corp or IBM,
Okay.
and one that was actually my idea. So yeah.
Okay. All right. I think this is the reason like you have been rewarded with various titles, including IIUG Directors Award, and you also being named as an IBM champion 14 plus times, right?
Mhm.
So which recognition has been the most meaningful to you? I know that both have their separate identity and separate
Yeah.
benefits, but as per you, which recognition has been the most meaningful to you and why?
I think possibly the IBM Informix Directors Award or IIUG Directors Award, which I received many years ago, before I was directly involved with the board of directors. I'm on the board now,
Okay.
but back then I was not. I think, and it was a recognition of the support that I gave to and then continue to give to the Informix user community, answering questions on forums, and of course providing the utilities and things like that.
Mhm. Okay. All right. And if we talk about your experience as a board member, so as a board member of IIUG, how do you see the role of community involvement and education in the evaluation of database technologies?
Sure. So the IAUG, the International Informix Users Group, has been very important to the continuation of Informix as a product,
Hmm.
and its recognition within IBM. You know, IBM has 2 major relational databases, right? They have DB2,
DB2. Yeah.
and they have Informix, and they bought Informix in large part in large part to convert all of us users to DB2, and dump the product. But here it is, 23 years later, and we're still here, and the
Yes.
product is still here. You know, and it's not legacy. IBM continues to improve and the product from version to version. When version 15 comes out, it's going to revolutionize the industry again,
Okay.
as it did twice before. Um, and it's going to add capabilities that I can't talk about, but that the industry is just going to be like that. And a large part of that is the fact that the IAG exists and that we won't go away, and we support our users. The Informix community is our focus. And through that, our interface with IBM and the developers and the support people at IBM and Informix before them, and HCL now, which actually does the actual development for IBM on the Informix product. So I think that's the important thing. You know, we maintained user forums for many years. Now those forums are under IBM auspices, but we continue to support that, and we have our own tech talks, which we provide roughly monthly, tech talks from users and also from HCL and IBM technicians, and support people, exposing features and talking about how better ways to use the product.
Okay.
I believe I'm doing an IBM talk later this week, and IBM is doing a tech talk on Informix with Watson X
What's
in
next?
a couple of weeks for us. So there's a lot that we do. We ran conferences for many years in person. We did a couple of virtual conferences. At this point, we're considering what to do next for conferences, and whether people want in person or virtual. But
Okay.
it continues.
All right. Okay. Now, let's talk a bit about database performance. So, database performance tuning is one of your specialties. So,
Mhm.
what are some common performance pitfalls you have seen organization makes, and how do you typically address them? Because you have witnessed various things throughout your journey. So,
Sure.
what's your point?
I mean, the most important pitfall that people run into is saying the system works, let it be. If it ain't
Okay.
broke, don't fix it. But organizations change. Hopefully they grow. The needs of the organization change from time to time. And then that means you need to revisit how your system is configured, how it's tuned. Um, I have a set of metrics that I developed over the years, that the community uses to get a kind of a quick and dirty view of how the system is performing. And I think running those and keeping track of those is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's the most important. The most important thing, and the biggest pitfall is ignoring your system.
Yeah. Right.
You know.
Okay. Fine. So now, Art, I would like to ask another question which is related to mentorship. I know that there are many students who are taking inspiration from you, and you are playing as a role of mentor to many of us, right? But still, I want to ask you one question in a different way. Like, who has been your mentor, and how have they helped and played a vital role in your success?
Mhm. I've had a few, as
Okay.
everybody has, I hope. Um, one of the early mentors for me was one of my bosses, who felt that the role of a manager in technology organization is to support his people,
Mm-hmm.
and give them the freedom to do their job without being
Right.
interfered with from above and below. Um, and at the same time, of course, keeping us honest and keeping us,
Yes.
monitoring what we were doing and making sure everybody was doing their job, of course. But I think that was important to me as a group leader from time to time, during my career. Um, in the Informix role, there have been several people among the Informix users group and user community, and even among the Informix people, who have been mentors for me. Most notable, Lester Knudsen,
Okay.
who recently retired, and I think he and I um, have worked off of each other to learn and grow and understand the product that we support. He's also a consultant, a competitor, a friend, a mentor, in many ways.
Okay. All right. So as like we have many topics, in fact, in terms of Informix, and there are many things that we can discuss. But just because of the limitation of time, I would like
Mhm.
to ask my last question, which is related to your hobbies. So what hobbies or interests do you pursue outside your professional life that helps you to stay motivated and inspired?
So staying motivated and inspired, yeah. I One of the things that keeps me going is, as the Informix product changes and grows, I
Mhm.
dive back into my utilities again. How can I make them better?
Okay.
Um, and that is an important thing for me, because that helps keep me focused on what what it is that we do. All of my utilities came out of some real need, and so they're really useful, but I
Right.
need to keep them that way for myself. Other things I have in the past been a bowler, a billiards player, a skier.
Okay.
At this point, my children and my grandchildren are my main focus in my off time when I'm not working. So
Okay. All right. So thank you so much, Art, for joining us in this episode and for sharing your expertise related to Informix. And thank you so much for all those utilities which you have provided to the community. And thank you
well,
once again for joining and for sharing your time.
you're welcome, and thank you for providing this forum for people. Thank you.
Thank you.